podcasting with my co-host Warren, and today we have a very, very special guest, Mr. Tinagero, the headmaster of St. Andrews. Very pleased to have him, so we're going to get right into it. Warren, you want to start us off?
Yeah, of course. So, our first question is, where did you grow up?
Well, so first off, Warren and John, thank you for having me.
Of
I'm
course.
excited to be here with both of you and excited to get the world's podcast
Of course.
off the ground and running. I think it's a great project and I'm happy to be here. The first question I think was, where did I grow up?
Yeah.
Is that right? So I grew up initially in Queens, New York. Right on the border of Long Island, a town called Little Neck, which is probably pretty close to
very
where
close
you
to
grew
me.
up.
Yeah.
So we grew up there, then we moved, as I got older, we moved further north of the city to Putnam County, which is just about an hour north of the city.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I come from.
And you like growing up there? You still have family out there in New York?
My family, most of my family is gathered in New York. I'm an only child,
Okay.
and so my extended family, like my cousins and everybody, are really important to me. And they're based almost either in New York or like Western Connecticut. Everybody's still based there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm big in New York as well.
And so it means a lot to me, right?
Yeah.
So like it's sort of part of my DNA, for sure. The same way that I think about here, like being a New Englander is a part of everybody's DNA. You hear people talk all the time about like welcome to New England.
Yeah.
And the Patriots and the Bruins and the Celtics and Boston. I feel the same way, right? The Giants, the Yankees, the Knicks.
Put with your hats.
That's like
Yeah.
that's where it's at. So for me, and so Knicks 2-0, by the way.
Yeah.
So that's sort of definitely baked into my DNA. And Mrs. Tinagero and I went to the same high school together. We grew up together. We've known each other since middle school,
That's awesome.
which is sort of bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
And so she has a similar background that I do. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what brought you to this area then? What made you pick to go to Barrington, Rhode Island, out of all places?
Well, St. Andrews drew me to this area. In 2011, I was essentially a vice president at New York University in Abu Dhabi, which is in the Middle East near Dubai.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, the things that I care about in education are like international education, are like, do kids have access to tricky curriculum, are like, are schools that serve diverse learners, so kids who learn and think differently. And so at the time I was in the Middle East and I was called and asked to take a look at St. Andrews. And I did, I figured why not. And Mrs. Tinagero and I fell in love with this school. And then we were graciously, and we were lucky enough to be invited to lead the school. And so that's sort of almost 10 years ago now how we ended up here.
So, was being a headmaster always your dream, like after college and stuff? Like, is that really what you really wanted to pursue?
Well, so I was a teacher, right? And I taught, my first teaching assignment was at what's called a residential treatment center. So these are schools where they're residential schools, boarding schools, but they're for kids who've been removed from their homes. They can no longer live in their house because it's not a healthy environment.
Okay.
And that's when I really fell in love with like special education and serving students who didn't have access to great curriculum.
Yeah.
And then I moved to teach in New York City,
Right.
in a place called Co-op City, which is in the Bronx. And that's where I fell in love with urban settings. And then I went and I taught in a town called Dobbs Ferry, which at the time was sort of a middle class town. And that's where I fell in love with the International Baccalaureate program, because I was an IB teacher.
Yeah.
I taught TOK.
Did you?
I did.
Wow.
I
How
taught
pretty
TOK.
crazy.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah. Is that where your wife got it as well? Is that
That's a different story. She should be the one you interview for that story. And then I was asked there's a huge school reform effort in New York City, which meant that they were going to try and help the school district become really amazing. And I was invited to oversee the literacy and literature instruction across 35 high schools. And I liked a lot of things about that, like going into schools and helping them teach better. But I missed being school-based. And at the time, you guys have heard of Bill Gates?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So Bill and Melinda Gates, that was his wife at the time, they started a foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And they gave some extraordinary amount of money to New York City to help young sort of entrepreneurs start schools. And I was invited to apply to open a school in New York City. And so we meeting a team of teachers, very young group, we wrote a proposal and defended that proposal, and were awarded the opportunity to open a brand new school in 2005 in New York City, or in the South Bronx. And so that's when I really fell in love with leadership, and really fell in love with the idea of, that these roles that the other heads of school have is about, you have a canvas and you get to create and build something. So we built this great facility, we had this great program for kids who, at that time, it was sort of post-crack epidemic in the South Bronx. So it was, poverty rates were at an all-time high, suicide rates amongst teenagers were at an all-time high. And I thought if we could help with the schools, we might be able to help with the communities there. And that's when I fell in love with it. And then from there, I was recruited to NYU. And I spent 4 years there before being recruited here. And so I think sort of along that journey is when I fell in love with the idea of school leadership. I never had it in my head that I would be like a headmaster or head of school for boarding school, but it's sort of, I think life happens this way, as it sort of evolves. And I started as a teacher. I thought I was going to be a teacher for the rest of my life. And so that's sort of how that path unfolded for me.
Awesome.
It was great. It was amazing. It's been a wonderful journey. And I love being here. So
what was the school called that you opened up in New York?
So I opened two, actually. So the first one was Mott Hall Bronx High School. It's still there. It's a great school. The principal who runs it is amazing. She was on the founding team with us. And the second school was Mott Hall Charter School, which was a 6 through 8 middle school. And I opened that as a board member and a founder. And there's probably 15 Mott Halls now. Chess was a key component of what we were doing. It's full uniform. You guys would have hated it. You wore a tie every day. It was not in your space for sure. So that's still there. There's probably about 400 kids that go to that school.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's in sort of the Morrisania section of the Bronx. It's awesome. It's great.
It's really, really cool. So I was thinking about that you're big on leadership. What would you have any advice for any future leaders that would take advice from you? I St. Andrews in our community. What advice would you have for leaders, or that want to become leaders?
I think that I heard we had a guest speaker today, and one of the things that she started out saying that I thought was so key for leadership is how are you building people up? And I see that as nobody wants to follow anyone that doesn't make them feel good. It's people will remember more, there's a great quote, it's people will remember more about how you make them feel than what you said.
100%.
And so I think that's really key, and especially as young people, you can get caught in cycles of saying nasty things to each other. Both you guys are on the court or on the field. That's part of it, I think, but I also think there's an opportunity for young leaders to build themselves up, build each other up. And the second thing I would say is curiosity. That, if you are asking a lot of questions about the world around you, why does this work like that? How does this work? It allows you to see a broader perspective, which allows you to understand how you could play a bigger role in that. So for instance, student government right now, you guys are making your speeches and the elections are coming up. So I think, a lot of the students tend to focus on things like food, or are cell phones allowed in the dining hall,
that's
right?
That's
the biggest one, right? So I think that if you're going to run on a platform like that, the more you know, the more articulate you can be about that issue. And so I would encourage students who are curious about how food is served, or why we have the food we have, or this rules of the cell phones. That line of curiosity would help you be able to tell another story. If you kept asking questions, like Chef Jason, how come we got pizza every Friday? Why can't we do something a little bit different? And he gives you an answer. And you say, okay, but if that's true, then why couldn't we do X, Y, and Z? So I think those are really important. Curiosity, lifting people up, and then doing something different. Leadership really is putting yourself out there. And so that means that if you're a team captain, it means you're sitting there and you're saying, let's go, we gotta do better than this. or that's not the way we do it here. And if you're a dorm proctor, it's, come on, we got like 5 things we got to do to get up a level. Let's go. We can do this together.
Sure.
Or if it's student government, it's, class pride is on the line. So I think that putting yourself out there, being curious, and lifting other people up are really key.
I couldn't agree with you more. Do you think that makes a successful student though, being like very curious about what you learn?
Well, I mean, being a successful student at St. Andrews, to me, there's a component of how much you study.
Yeah.
Like that is, to me, is like how ambitious is your schedule, how much you care about your classes. That's a very important component. That's sort of what determines your grades in many ways.
Yeah.
And then I think the character that you demonstrate sort of outside of the classroom and the way you approach your day-to-day life, like are you on time for your classes and your meetings? Like there's it's the smallest, littlest things to me that will make you a good person that have very little to do with physics or English, and I was an English teacher, that are just as important as what happens in the classroom. Like being on time, like being curious, like if you say you're going to call someone, you call them. Asking for help, like these things that I think St. Andrews does a really good job of nurturing in students, I think are just as important as what you do in the classroom. And I would say, I think it's also true that as students, you're least likely to remember what happens in the classroom 20 years from now.
100%.
You'll remember how Miss Berry made you feel in English class. You might remember how you were coached by Coach Hart. You might remember how, the bus trip for lacrosse. Like those are the things you'll remember. And I think as a student, you want to have as many of those awesome experiences as possible.
Sure, I understand everything. Yeah.
So we're a big sports school. So I want to kind of like ask you, like, what type of sports did you play growing up?
We are a pretty sporty school. I do think it's worth noting, though, before we go into what I did growing up, I think it's worth noting that I love the sports that we have at St. Andrews. And we don't have football, and we don't have hockey, and we don't have a lot of other sports.
Baseball.
We don't have baseball. And sometimes I wish we had them, but the culture that we have, if you think about the sports we offer and the culture that we have, there seems to be an alignment. And I think that's something that, if I were you guys, I would want to investigate. For me, I was a soccer player growing up. I was a better baseball player when I was, until I was maybe 14 or 15. But then when I got to high school, all the baseball players got far better than I was. So I played like on the all-star team in the Little League, and I was really good, and then I wasn't. Then my arm strength wasn't there. I just wasn't as good. Whereas soccer, I was able to keep pace sort of most of my career. And I think, I'm a terrible basketball player. So when I would play, my funny stories, I played Christian Youth, CYO, Christian Youth Organization basketball. And the opposing team would always say, pass it to Tinagero, because I was the worst player on the team. So they're trying to get the ball in my hands. So I'm a terrible basketball player. But I was a pretty good defender in soccer. And, as I've gotten older, I played soccer until I was maybe 40. And then I think I play some golf, but not a lot. I think it's a great sport to learn because you can play it forever. But skiing is really the thing that I spend as much time doing, and it's really hard to be the head of a school where basketball is such a popular sport because it's hard to go to all the games and do skiing.
Do you always are you always in the St. Andrews golf outing too, or not usually?
I'm always in the golf outing. I don't know if they like that. I'm a pretty poor golfer, and so I'm always there. It's important for me to represent our school.
Yeah, of course.
But I feel bad for my team usually. I'm like the last one picked. Nobody wants me on the team, kind of a thing. So I played a lot more before our sons were born. And my dilemma with golf is that it takes 4 hours to play one round of golf. And that's just if you're fast, and that's if you don't have to drive anywhere. And we had young kids, and it meant that you couldn't be there with the family. You think your whole Saturday would be gone. And I felt like that wasn't fair. So I didn't really play as much golf as the boys were growing up.
So I have like a good question for you in the school. What's like your overall vision for the school and the future of the school? What do you hope to see? What happens?
Oh, so what I love about, there are a number of things I love about St. Andrews. One of them is that there's this thread people talk about that's like, you know, we talk about when we were schools founded as a school for orphan boys and Father Chapin. Like, I love that. And I think there's still a thread that connects to that. And whatever we do or whatever we become, it's important to me that we maintain that thread. Our school is doing what's called a strategic plan right now. And so over the course of this year, we're trying to figure out where do we want to go for the next 5 years. Around curriculum, around facilities, around students, just all of it. Yeah. And I think, you know, we're probably pretty interested in figuring out how do we serve more kids, in more ways and in more places. So I think that's probably, you know, what's in terms of vision is like, how do we do that? How do we figure out, and that could mean anything from as simple as like, do we offer more sports than we do now?
Yeah.
It could mean, do we retrofit the dining hall or something? Like, it could mean a bunch of different things, but more kids in more places, in more ways, I think is a mantra that I think about right now.
That's awesome. So you would want to make the school a little bit bigger in a sense, like a couple more kids, would you say, for each grade, or keep it kind of the same size?
So the hard part about, with school size, what happens is like we're at 222 students now, maybe 221. What's wonderful about that is you are known. Yeah. Like, you see me all the time, you know who I am, I see you in the gym. Everybody is known. The tricky part about it is that it's hard to offer as many programs for students that you want to offer, right? You don't have the limited amount of staff, you don't have enough kids. So if you grew your kids a little bit, you could offer more programs, right? And so I think the tricky part is finding the right balance between how do you maintain this sort of intimate family community and still offer students enough different opportunities.
Exactly.
So a good example would be squash. Yeah. So that's, you can only have, 12 kids on the court at a time in our program, so it fits us to add that. Whereas you couldn't, if you added football, you need 65 kids, 50 kids to field a football team.
100%, yeah.
We only have 100 boys, so right? So what would happen to soccer? What would happen to, and not everybody likes football.
Yeah.
So I think if you got a little bit more kids, you could probably offer a little bit more opportunities.
Yeah. So do you have like a kind of like phrase almost that you would tell like a student that's visiting here, thinking about going to St. Andrews, that would really like want them to kind of like attend the school? Warren, so tonight I go to the Gordon School. Wow. You know this place. They have their school fair tonight, right? And so I imagine that I'll see a bunch of 8th grade students who will say to me, what can you tell me about St. Andrews? And there's a long story you could tell there. But I think the idea that, we show you how valuable you are and help you become the best version of yourself is sort of key to what we try and do here. Like, how do we get the best version of John and the best version of Warren over 4 years? And that's what we do. And that's very different than what other schools do. Yeah. Now, if people say, what's your athletic program? How big a role does athletics play in your school? I'd say we're a pretty sporty school. Most of our students have to play or do play a sport, and here are the ones we offer. Mm-hmm. If they say, well, what about the arts? I say, we got a pretty great focus on the arts too. Mm-hmm. Here's what we do. But really the thread that runs through all of it is how do you become the best version of yourself. It's not how are you the best lacrosse player, Warren, that's ever played. We're not an academy. Yeah. You know what I mean? We're not, what do you call it, ING Academy?
Yeah, absolutely.
ING?
Yeah.
So that's not what we do, and all due respect to IMG, but that's not what I want. That's not what I care about. Yeah. I like it when I see you guys serving, being kind to each other, and being in community together. That's St. Andrews. Yeah. It's not IMG. Yeah. That's not
Montverde, these top prep schools.
That's not our deal. Yeah. Mount Hermon, that's not us, and I think that's okay, and I'm proud of that. And if we ever become that, then I think we've really lost that thread that I was talking about at the beginning.
It's awesome. That's cool.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, because because I 100% agree with you. Like when you go to these big prep schools like IMG and stuff, you're gonna get way better, right? You'll be a better athlete. You might become a little bit better soon, right? But you don't really know everybody there. Like you're not gonna have these top guys go back to the school and really visit. Where here we have such a phenomenal alumni that everybody comes back and visits, and that's why I feel like.
I think that is why. I think the idea that you feel like you can always come back here means that we've achieved our mission, right? That the only reason you would come back is if you left here better than you came. And so you feel that connection to your faculty, you feel that connection to your advisors, your coaches. I love that, and I think that makes us unique, and I'm proud of that. And if we ever lose that, then we've done something wrong.
For sure, I 100% agree with you. I just want to talk about this a little bit off time, but I know you're a big New York guy. How are we looking? You think the Knicks are going to take it home this year?
I don't know. What are they, 3-0 last night?
Yeah,
3-0?
yeah.
Man, they look good.
Yeah.
I missed Dante. I liked him.
I did too. I
thought he was a
He
lot of
was a
fun
good
to watch.
He was a great glue guy in Hardenstein too. He was another.
Hardenstein.
He's out in Oklahoma.
Yeah, Hardenstein is good. I mean, he was always sort of a backup center.
Yeah.
And I liked his game. He had that weird sort of top of the key game.
Yeah,
Pass
for
up
sure.
right there and that floater shot that he had.
Yeah.
But they look good.
I do.
They look nasty. And so I'm excited for the season. It's been a long time. Warren, if you're a Knicks fan, I mean, it's probably since like 1998 that you had a season that you were really proud of until last season. I mean, once in a while we made the playoffs with Julius Randle, but since it was like Latrell Sprewell and Allen Houston and Patrick Ewing, that's when we were good. And I feel like we're back to that again. Like I said. But I don't know. Boston is so nasty, so I don't know how we'll do.
Yeah. Boston always does have a really good team. They're always tough for us. For the Knicks. Yeah.
Knicks do have a good duo coming now.
They have what?
Carl Anthony Towns, you heard about him?
Yep.
Him and Jalen Brunson, that could be scary.
So I was watching highlights from Towns last night. He looks amazing. And Mikal Bridges is really fantastic.
Yeah.
And then who's the other one I was thinking of? That's really the guy who runs all over the place.
Josh Hart.
Josh Hart. Yeah, he's great too. So I'm excited to watch them this season. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I like the Giants too. They've been off to a lousy start, but I feel
Big
like.
win last week though. That was a big win.
Thank you for saying that, Mr. O'Leary. I agree with you. I think they've got something in the tank, and we haven't seen it yet. So.
Yeah, and that's without their arguably their best player, Malik Neighbors.
Yeah. What else you guys got?
So another question I kind of had is another of the alumni. How do you think once these people graduate, how do you think the reunions are like? What is it really to feel like you're part of St. Andrews after you graduate?
Oh. So we have family weekend coming up, right? Is that next weekend?
Next
weekend, right? So on Saturday is the end of family weekend. We'll play the side by each soccer games, and then everybody will leave.
Yeah.
But on Sunday, the alumni from the 1960s. Now this is 40, 50, 65 years ago they graduated from St. Andrews.
Wow.
65 years ago. They'll be on campus for their reunion.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. And we were only graduating 6 kids a year back then. We were tiny. So the fact that they come back together, they call themselves the bad boys of the 60s. And they've got a little bit of an edge to them, and they're proud of that. So they're back on campus for that. Now that tells you a couple of things, right? It tells you that there are alums for whom this place meant the world.
Yeah.
And 45 years later, they're still coming back.
Yeah.
We have about 900 active alums, so that's small. Most schools that have been around for 135 years would have 4,000 or 5,000.
Yeah.
So of those 900, we see a pretty high level of engagement. Miss Farmer, I don't know if you know Miss Farmer, but she's extraordinary, and she's our alumni officer, and she's sort of on the road all the time, so that I have to go to I have to be in New York for a conference in February. But I'm betting you that at dinner time I'm going to be sitting down with alums getting to know them. So I think there's a real affiliation for St. Andrews. That table, right there, this is called the boardroom.
Yeah.
And that's where 25 trustees sit and tell me what to do. They're my bosses.
Really?
Yes. And the people who sit I think of the people that sit at that table, I want to say 30% of them, don't quote me on this, but I think 30% of them are alumni or parents of alumni that govern this school. that are telling me what to do, or my bosses. So I'd say to you guys is, being an alumni is what you make of it. We'll send you a care package, to college and things like that. We take it seriously.
Yeah.
We tend to you after you leave here. And I think the question I would ask if I were you is, how can I give back to my school as I get older and get, and my perspective broadens and I understand things some more. But yeah, our alumni are probably our biggest donors in many cases. They're our biggest ambassadors, and they sit, alumni are alumni parents, help run the school categorically.
That's awesome.
No, it's the best.
Yeah.
So, to you guys, imagine yourself sitting in that seat 15 years from now, telling me what to do. Doesn't that sound amazing?
Sounds a
You
little
could
odd.
be like, Mr. T, put your cell phone away. What are you doing?
I guess, it's a little weird. I actually have a funny story. So Miss Farmer, I don't know if you know this man by the name of Mr. Bruce, Dick Bruce.
I know Dick Bruce,
He's-
yeah.
So Miss Farmer connected me with him. So I don't know, it's weird. So we connected with each other. And I used to live out where Mr. Bruce lived, so we used to live close to each other.
That's right.
So I went by his house this summer and actually played basketball with the kids, and we talked for about an hour. It was like a
Did you really?
I swear, it was awesome. Awesome. We had a great time.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Kids are awesome, really good kids. One kid's going into 8th grade, and I think the other one's going into either 5th or 6th. And Mr. Bruce was an awesome guy.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was
That's
really,
cool.
Yeah. He told me he might be coming up for a couple games this year. He's like, he usually goes to the golf outing, but he's like, he's not as good anymore.
He was at the golf outing.
Yeah, he
this
told
year.
me he's not as good as anymore, but he used to be really, really
Yeah,
good.
he's a talented golfer. Better than I am, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I have a question about like the whole board. So do the boards, do they come into the school and kind of oversee everything, and then you're kind of like the day-to-day guy?
Yeah, so the board is comprised of 25 volunteers, and they meet 5 times a year. And they have 1 employee.
Okay.
That's me.
Yeah.
And then there are 5 or 6 committees of the board that meet 5 or 6 times a year. So there's like a finance committee, an endowment committee, an education and student life committee, and a facilities committee. And there's some other little ones too, and those committees sort of determine how we allocate our resources, what the rules are and the policies are that I have to enforce and support. And then myself and the administrative team do the day-to-day management of the school.
That's awesome.
So that's Miss McMullen, Miss Morin, Mike Smith in the business office, Mr. Cross, Miss Pierce, like that team, Miss Donahue, you probably know who she is.
Yeah.
So that's the group that is charged with the day-to-day leadership of the school.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then they'll get that, and then how do the people that know about the school, how do they get the visitors to come in? Like, how does that work with the whole people finding out about the school, and then I book a visit here for the people watching?
Yeah, I should have said Miss Arnone also sits
Yeah.
on that administrative team, and she's the director of recruitment, essentially, or
Okay.
enrollment.
Yeah.
And so you probably haven't seen her in the past 2 weeks because she's traveling the world
Oh, really?
Wow.
trying to find students that want to come to St. Andrews. So that's an effort that includes 4 or 5 people that scatter all over the country and the world. We have people that just got back from Asia last night. Miss Arnone is probably in Europe right now. I'm going to the Gordon Fair. So you take sort of a whole team effort of spreading out all over to be present and meet parents that are interested in sending their kids to independent schools, and then they have to figure out what's the right school for them. So, the same thing that I said to you guys at the top of this around sort of like what our mission is, that's what Ms. Arnone is saying, and then people are deciding whether or not we're the right fit. So I'll put it back to you, Warren, and then you, John, how did you hear about St. Andrews?
I was really just looking around in the Rhode Island area because after Gordon, I knew I wanted to stay in a smaller private school type of area, and I saw St. Andrews, and that kind of fit. And after going on a Zoom hearing about you guys, going to meeting with Mr. Cross, I kind of got to find out more about the community, and that's kind of like a family here, which is what really kind of drove me here too.
So really, it was Mr. Cross who at the time was in that role, in the admissions role, and he connected with you, and then introduced you to our school. You probably interviewed, went over Zoom, right?
Yeah.
How about you?
So I went to go visit the St. Andrews down in Delaware with my friend Cole Fox, and he wound up not going to school there, but I love the school a lot, and I was thinking about going there. And then my aunt is good friends with Cole Swider's mom, Miss Swider, and she said, Sean should come up to the school called Tinagero. It's a great school. So I went up there, I visited, I loved it. Coach Hart was there, Miss Swatter was there, and Connor was there. It was a really, really fun time. They showed me around, it was awesome. And then I got on a Zoom with Mr. Cross, and he was like awesome. He couldn't have met me. He literally made me feel like I was at home. And I was like, I have to go to here.
So yours is like a combination of word of mouth and outreach, right? Both like those are very powerful tools, and yours is sort of your more typical. I went to Gordon, I'm local, and here are the Rhode Island-based options that are available to me. And then, like you said, I saw my people at St. Andrews. I wanted to be in community there. That's usually what happens. But there are people on our team that specialize in international travel. They're specialized in like learning support. They're specialized in day school. They're specialized in athletes, that kind of a thing.
So how does that work with the whole international thing? Because I know there's a language barrier there. So how do like Miss Unknown translate where it comes to the either where she goes to China or like different parts of Asia or Europe? How does that work with recruiting kids to come here?
Oh, so cool. So I'll be in China. I go to China on October 30th. I'll be there for a week and a half. And you meet with families and you meet with potential students. And the potential students you're meeting with, oftentimes are English because it's a year away. So their English hasn't gotten to the point where it's, you feel great about it yet. There's still something they have to work on. And so sometimes you'll be in a conversation and you have a translator. And you'll say something, oftentimes to the parents of the student, because they're their key driver in decisions. So you'd say, Mom, what is it about St. Andrews that makes you interested in coming to join our community? And then you stop, and the translator translates for you into Chinese or Vietnamese, exactly what you just said. And then you're just waiting there, right? So you're just sitting there, and then they translate, and you don't understand a word they said. And then the parent speaks back to the translator, and you don't understand a word they're saying to the translator. So you're just waiting. And then the translator says to you whatever it is that the parent said. But you have this, what feels like a lot of time in between when you ask the question and when you get the answer. And it used to make me really uncomfortable, and now I'm like, this is delightful. I can just sit here and relax and wait for your answer to come in. And then you try and build a rapport with families. And so you do have a translator with you usually when you're on those trips.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And then, so you guys will bring one, or they'll just usually have one over there?
We have a translator who we've worked with for years. When they can join us, we have them come with us. And then there are times when they're not available because you're visiting so many different cities. And so in those cases, you hire somebody. It's actually a very good job if you can get one. And then, the more you know about the translator you have and you develop a rapport with them, you try and keep that same one.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Any more questions, Warren?
No, just one more to wrap it up for you.
All right, I got a couple for you guys.
So, what's some things that you would want us to kind of remember about our experience here at St. Andrews? So, after leaving the school, what's one thing that you would really want us to kind of remember?
Well, I guess I would hope that 5 years from now, somebody's like, what was your high school experience like? And you feel good, even before you say anything, you feel excited to say something, right? Whatever that experience was, that it's filling for you. And so that feeling, it's sort of like I said before, people remember how you feel, how they made you feel before, more than what you said. And so my hope would be that in 5 years, if somebody says to you, what was your high school like? The way you feel reminds you of your best days here. I think that would be pretty awesome. I think on the academic side, my hope is that, frankly, my expectation is that you guys leave here prepared for whatever steps it is that you're going to take next. Now, some of you may take a gap year, some of you may go to the best college you can get into, some of you may go to the military. I hope everybody has the best next steps that they need. And my hope is that we prepared you. And so that's the first question I'll ask you when you guys come back at Fall Family Weekend next year is, did St. Andrews prepare you for whatever your next steps were? So, that's what I think of when you leave here, that you can always come home. And I do think, Warren, that at the center of that is love. We want you to know that you're loved. And that's people get, you say you love kids. And I do. I love the students I serve. I love the families we serve. And I want them to feel that, and I want them to remember that. Because if we don't do that, then I don't know what we're doing here. So that's what I say.
Alright.
You have any questions for us?
Well, so tell me, guys, like, are you guys, what podcasts are you listening to these days?
So, a couple of different ones. Me and him kind of like Joe Rogan, and we've been, do you know the Nelk Boys or no?
I don't. I know Joe Rogan.
Okay, so the Nelk Boys are kind of these, like, there's like this funny group that they used to do pranks, but now they get like a ton of big guests on their podcast, like all different people, like, you know, like the top athletes, the top fighters, the biggest people in politics, like all diverse people. And they were like really, really cool. And me and Warren needed a cast project. And we came up with this idea of a podcast last year, and it was called JW Podcast. It had no follow through whatsoever, there, right? We just had an idea, right? And all of a sudden now, cast is coming up. Warren mentions it against me, and I'm like, I think we should really do it. So we do a test episode with our buddy Caden about a week or two ago, and we absolutely loved it. We fell in love with it too. Like, we gotta start pursuing this. And then Warren was like, I think Mr. Tinagero would be a great guest, and I was like, yeah, let's do that one.
And so what's I think of it as, like, the open forum is so much fun, right? That we just get to sit here and have a discussion.
Exactly.
Right? But what does it take, like, how do you learn how to do the form, the craft of doing a podcast?
Yeah.
The ones I listen to have an introduction, they've been edited, then they have to be promoted, like all those things. And how are you thinking about those things for your cast project?
I mean, this is definitely gonna start out like small, for instance, just like trying to get videos out right now is our goal.
Okay.
But like going on, we kind of like want to be able to like edit, kind of like get tons of different names and stuff on here, and kind of like just, I don't know, just make it be more than just a cast project. I think is the ending goal, is for this to be more than just a school project, for people to actually like, be able to watch this, learn about, for instance, St. Andrews, like how you're talking about, and just like tons of students, different backgrounds.
And so what would be the thread for your podcast? So you're talking about Joe Rogan, he's got a certain style, I guess. The other podcasts,
Full Send and Boys, they have a different style. I think our style is kind of like, we're just two kids kind of like at a school in Barrington, Rhode Island, and we're just interviewing kids from kind of all around the world. And Joe Rogan and the Nelk Boys do that, right? But they have the biggest names. We don't have the biggest names right now. And I think that's what separates us, to see people before they get big, right? You don't know these people, so we can be interviewing future athletes, future artists, future politicians, and people don't even know that, so we can really get their story before they really become an adult. Because right now in high school, these are kind of the changing points in your life right now, where you're taking a big step into college, then you're going to go into business or whatever you want to do in life. So I think the youth, we have the youth right now, and we get some different people involved in that, and we get different teachers and people that love podcasts. I think that would be really, really helpful for us.
And so, do you think of it as like your the St. Andrews podcast, or do you think of it more as like you're just trying to sharpen your interview skills and get as many people on as you can? Like, how are you? Is it going to be mostly? But you asked me a question about sports, and I wondered, when I heard that, will there be a question about sports for all of your guests? Like, is that going to be a thing?
I mean, it definitely matters their background. Like, if sports is like a priority in their life, for instance, like us interviewing Keaton, he's a big soccer player. That's like kind of like his life goal almost.
Yeah, it sure is.
So, going off of that would be like a good topic for him. While someone else who could be in like the arts department of like St. Andrews, we could ask them about kind of like acting and kind of like performing, and how that kind of like motivates them and helps them become a better person like outside of just like that sport.
So it's really about just understanding different humans and what makes them sort of tick.
100%, you kind of have to read that person, know that person. Like, for us, like, we actually have to know a little bit about you. Like, I knew you were the headmaster of St. Andrews and stuff like that. I kind of knew you played sports because you're always at our sporting events. I was kind of like, you're big into sports, you're always at all events. I mean, I know you're the headmaster, but like, I can see you actually have like a joy of excitement at the games. I do. So I kind of knew, but like, if we were to interview like Warren, like a Miss Dunn or a Miss Fain, it would obviously be different topics, different things we would talk about. So.
All right, gentlemen, I appreciate your effort. I love where you're going and what you're focused on.
Of course, I have one last question.
Yeah, please.
If you have any advice for any upcoming students that would love to come to St. Andrews, what is one thing you would say for them? What would be like the advice for why to come to St. Andrews?
The community. This is the best community you could be part of. And I imagine a lot of schools say that. We transcend that, I think, and I invite anybody to come take a look at it. We know
that when people come to our campus, they want to come to our school. When they meet our, you know, the people that make up St. Andrews, they want to come here. And so I think that'd be my, you know, my big offering.
That's awesome. Or do you want to sign us out on the podcast?
Of course. Thank you guys for tuning in for the first episode with Mr. Tinagero. It's been an honor, and we hope you guys tune in for further videos. And thank you, Mr. T.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you,
Appreciate it.
John. This was great. I appreciate this.
See you guys on the next
See ya.
pod. Peace.